Welcome to the PlantFit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Dr. Neal Barnard. Dr. Barnard is an adjunct associate professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences in Washington, D.C. He's also the president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and founder of the Barnard Medical Center. Today, Dr. Barnard will be delivering a presentation on hormonal health and how to get your body back in balance. Enjoy the presentation.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Neal Barnard. Today I want to talk about getting our bodies into balance for better health. And before I start, I do want to say a word about what's really been on everybody's mind over the past year, and that's foods and immunity. And you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the COVID-19 caused by this new coronavirus. And that led everyone, first of all, to one conclusion, that when we looked at who lived and who died, in many cases, the difference was having some kind of underlying medical condition, high blood pressure, diabetes, lung disease, or heart disease. And what you notice is that in most all of these cases, foods can end up playing a role. Foods can help hypertension, diabetes, and so forth. Okay, so let's just walk through this. More than 20 years ago, a classic study called the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, the DASH study, was conducted, 459 adults. And let me walk you through this. When we look at blood pressure, the study was an 8-week-long study. And the top line here is people who didn't make any diet changes. Their blood pressure didn't change much. The second line is people who increased vegetables and fruits, those neglected foods that people end up pushing around on their plates hoping no one will notice. Well, if they increase your vegetables and fruits, they've got lots of potassium, they don't have much sodium, blood pressure falls. Good. The third line is people who not only increased vegetables and fruits, but they did an additional step. They reduced meat and reduced fat, and their blood pressure dropped even more, as you can see. Now, this is systolic blood pressure. That's the top number. So if I say your blood pressure is 120/80, 120 is systolic. The bottom number, diastolic, changes too. And exactly the same way, the people who pumped up the vegetables and fruits, reduced meat, reduced fat, their blood pressure dropped the most. But here's the most amazing thing, is when did that blood pressure drop occur? It dropped within about the first 2 weeks of the study. In other words, if you make a big diet change, you see your blood pressure coming down towards normal within about 14 days on average. Pretty impressive. Now, with regard to diabetes, that's an underlying condition too that also makes these viral infections worse. But our research team brought in people who had diabetes. Half of them went on a conventional diet. That's the red line here. And this is the drop in hemoglobin A1C. That's a measure of blood sugar control. They did better overall. But the blue line here is people who not only reduced meat, but eliminated it. They followed a vegan diet. And as you can see, their A1C not only dropped more than the conventional diet was able to accomplish, but it dropped more steeply, much more rapidly. So what we're seeing here is that whether you have high blood pressure or you've got diabetes, when you get away from the when you get away from the meats and replace them with vegetables and fruits, you do better, and you do better really rapidly. And the importance of that is that we are now in a situation where people think, I don't want to be vulnerable if another virus comes around. So what can I do? Change your diet now. Don't just increase the vegetables and fruits and reduce the meat. Build your diet on vegetables and fruits and beans and grains. Dump the meat, dump the dairy. Now's the time to get to know the vegan foods. They're the best of all. Okay, but are there some special things that we can do? There was an interesting study done in the United Kingdom back in 2001 where they looked at garlic. And I have to tell you, I have kind of been a garlic skeptic. People would say garlic purifies the blood, blah, blah, blah. I thought those are just people who love Italian food, you know. However, this study made me think maybe there was actually something to it. It was a big study, 146 people. They all were given a capsule. Half of them got capsules with garlic extract in them. The other half got placebo capsules, dummy pills. And what they found is that when they looked during cold season over a 12-week period, Well, colds were greatly reduced. In the placebo group, 65 colds in that group. In the garlic group, only 24. Okay. Sick days, 366 sick days in the placebo group, only 111 in the garlic group. Okay, now I'm still a little bit skeptical because this study was actually done by people who sell garlic supplements. It's the Garlic Center, but they're good people. They're in the UK. And I have to say the study was well conducted, and it's kind of hard to impeach it. So, okay, if you're making your vegan spaghetti and you want to roast some garlic and dump it on top, go for it. Can't hurt you, might help you. Okay, but now there's more to it. Let's talk about just slimming down in general. You know it and I know it, that when a person goes on a plant-based diet, what happens? If they've got extra weight, they very often lose it. So back in 2009, researchers were looking at the virus H1N1. That's an influenza subtype. Began in the US, this big epidemic was spreading around. And in California, they noticed something really interesting. Of all the people who contracted this, about half were seriously overweight. They were obese. What does that mean? What we think happens is that fat cells are sometimes a welcome mat to the virus. The virus can easily get into the fat cells where it can propagate. And so if I lose weight, I'm not carrying so much body fat, I'm protected, okay? So a healthy plant-based diet, add some exercise too, will help you to trim down, get away from excess weight. Speaking of fat, let's talk about not body fat, but fat on your food. Your white blood cells are trying to do a tough job. You know, if you take a blood sample, the red blood cells are the ones that are carrying oxygen, but the white blood cells are soldiers, and they are looking for viruses, and they're looking for bacteria, things that don't belong in your bloodstream, to knock them out. But like all kinds of soldiers, they sometimes don't get the very best rations. And I gotta tell you, white blood cells are not effective soldiers if they're working in an oil slick. Researchers have done this work in a variety of ways. They will feed fatty foods to volunteers. They will, don't try this at home, they will drip fat into their bloodstream. They will take fat, mix it with cells in the test tube. And in all of these cases, what they show is that the more fat that's going into the system, the more the white blood cells don't work very well. That means they can't knock out an invader. Keep fat low. Good advice. Okay, avoiding dairy products seems to be important. This is especially important if you have any kind of lung disease, and let me focus on asthma. You've known children who've had asthma, adults with asthma, and in a quite good research study, researchers brought in a group of children with asthma. They took out the dairy and the eggs, and they had an improvement in what's called peak expiratory flow rate. What that means is your ability to breathe out, which is impaired in asthma. It was significantly better. Why would that be? What we think is happening is that in the same way as a person with asthma can react to pollen in the air or to animal dander, you can also react to other things, particularly foods. And what we believe is happening is that the dairy protein and the egg protein are causing the body to overreact, and that makes the asthma worse. You can try this yourself. If you have asthma, you know somebody who does, run. Do not walk to a completely plant-based diet. Check out the dairy products completely, see how you do. Okay, what about vitamins and minerals? Let me walk through 3 of them. Vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc. Okay, vitamin C. You may remember Linus Pauling, the famous American scientist. He won not 1, but 2 Nobel Prizes. And he was a big advocate for vitamin C. He said, it'll fight colds. And when he died, he was taking, believe it or not, about 18 grams of vitamin C per day. That's a truckload, that's a lot. But there's something to it. A research study done in the UK brought in elderly patients. They either had bronchitis, that's an inflammation of the airways, or bronchopneumonia. And they gave them really quite a small amount of vitamin C, 200 milligrams per day for 4 weeks. Or they gave them a placebo, a dummy pill, so that they couldn't tell which was which. But it worked. It greatly improved their clinical condition. So even a low dose of vitamin C does seem to help. When people take this to try to fight colds, everyone's got their own formula. But a fairly typical regimen that you'll see people doing is about 1,000 milligrams a day. And once in a while, they'll take a one-time dose at the beginning of about 6,000 milligrams. That's 6 grams a day to see if that knocks out the virus. I would be a bit cautious about having doses like that high on a daily basis going forward. Okay, let's talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D, as you know, comes from the sun. And when we were happily living in equatorial Africa, the sunlight on our skin created all the vitamin D that we need. Need for what? It helps our bodies to absorb calcium, but it also is a defender. Vitamin D appears to reduce cancer risk, and it also seems to help our immune system to be stronger in the face, not just of cancer cells, but of invaders too, like viruses. So unfortunately, my ancestors had the bad judgment to leave a happy home in equatorial Africa, and they ended up migrating to North Dakota, which is where I grew up, and sometimes there's not a whole lot of sun there, and you're not going to go out in February very much, so you can get low in vitamin D. What can you do? You can take a supplement. And a good study done in 2019 did a meta-analysis where they combined the results of 25 different randomized trials, huge study, almost 11,000 people, and it turned out that vitamin D supplementation decreased respiratory infections by 12%. However, those people who were really low in vitamin D at baseline, they had a really big reduction of about 70%. So vitamin D does seem to have something supporting it. Okay, let's talk about zinc. At Wayne State University 2007, they brought in 50 people and they gave them zinc, something called zinc gluconate. They gave it to them for 12 months and it reduced the risk of infections. Fair enough, it seems to work. However, zinc is like other metals, like iron or copper, where you need a little, but if you get too much, that can be bad too. Zinc can be toxic. Zinc can even harm your immunity. So what do? My own advice is not to take a zinc supplement on a daily basis. But if you've got a cold, that's a time when you can do it. There's a product that's sold in a lot of stores called Cold Ease. It's a commercial product, not promoting it. However, the research on it is good. And what they find is that at the first sign of the cold, people start taking it and their cold is not necessarily more benign, but it's more quickly resolved. Their cold is shorter. What is it? It's zinc. It's zinc in a sugary lozenge. Okay, so let me shift gears now. I want to talk about hormones. And for me, the way this started was with a phone call. I was sitting at my desk and a young woman called me up. She said, Dr. Barnard, I can't get out of bed. I'm miserable. And I said, well, tell me what you're going through. What is it? She said, I've got cramps, menstrual cramps. This is driving me crazy. About one day every month, it hurts so badly, it's like I'm being tortured. And so I said, well, let me give you some painkillers for a couple of days. But yet, to see if we can stop this from happening next month, let me make a suggestion. And I have to tell you, this suggestion was just an educated guess. I had remembered, as she was calling me up, that in cancer patients, researchers have tried to reduce the amount of estrogen. That's the female sex hormone. Reduce the amount of estrogen in their blood because estrogen is a hormone that can fuel the growth of cancer cells. So how do they do this? What they found is that you can reduce the amount of estrogen in the blood by increasing fiber and reducing fatty foods. So the young woman was calling me up. She didn't have breast cancer concerns. What she had was cramps, but I thought, what are cramps? Cramps are too much estrogen in the blood, thickening the lining of the uterus, causing too much cramping later. Okay, boost the fiber, reduce the fat. That will reduce the amount of estrogen so that maybe she'll feel better next month. This was my question, and this is what I recommended to her. I said, let me give you painkillers for now, but for the next 4 weeks, no animal products, minimize oils. Let's see what happens. She said, I'll try it. She called me back 4 weeks later and said, my period arrived, and this is astounding. No pain, no symptoms. And that's the way it continued month after month, unless she would violate one of these principles. So the idea was no animal products, but also keeping oils really, really low. Okay, so I thought that's some validation that this might work, but we needed to do a larger study. So I worked with our colleagues at Georgetown University. We brought in women. They all had moderate to severe pain, and half of them started the diet. What diet? The diet I just described. Vegan, no animal products, oils gone. The other group started a supplement that was actually just a dummy pill, a placebo pill. After 2 months, everybody switched. The diet group started the supplement group started the diet, and it works. We published the findings in a journal called Obstetrics and Gynecology, and we found less pain intensity, and not just that. We found not only was the pain improved, but so was PMS, moodiness, bloating, water retention. These symptoms all got better. Now, in the course of this study, we asked all the women to not use birth control pills or any other hormone, because that would goof up that would be a confounder of our study. And so if they were sexually active, we said, please use some other birth control method. And one of the women in the study said, Dr. Barnard, you don't have to worry about me at all. My husband and I don't use any kind of contraception. No, we don't use the pill. We don't use anything, because we were both evaluated years ago, and I'm infertile. She said, it's not him, it's me. I don't ovulate, and so we don't need contraception. We don't use the pill. Well, the very second month that she was on the low-fat vegan diet, she came into our research study. She said, Dr. Barnard, I got some bad news and some good news. I said, well, what is that? She said, well, the bad news is I'm leaving your study, and the good news is that I am pregnant. So anyhow, she was pregnant. She gave birth to a beautiful baby, and then several years later, she came to a lecture that I gave. She had 3 children at that point. Now, here's what I'm saying. The first patient that I described had a condition called dysmenorrhea, menstrual pain. This young woman had a condition called infertility. And sometimes you just want to take your pencil and take the eraser and just erase all those diagnoses, because what these young women really had was they were out of balance. See, hormones have to be in balance, not too little, not too much. Let me just walk you through what hormones are. Hormones are like a message. It's a letter that goes in the mail from one place to another. In a woman's body, the ovaries make estrogens that go to the reproductive organs to get her ready for reproduction. In a man's body, the testes make testosterone that, I guess, goes in the bloodstream and goes to his brain and makes him want to run for president, I guess. Anyhow, you get the idea. Hormones go from one part of the body with a message for another part of the body. It's like a letter in the mail. Well, just like letters, you can get a few of them or you can get a lot of them. And if you get too many, this can be a problem. That's right. Let's say there's not enough estrogen, not enough testosterone, not enough thyroid hormone, not enough insulin, not enough of the hormones that make your body work. Then your body's not going to function normally. But the same can be true if you've got hormone overload. You got too many letters in the mail, your body doesn't know how to react. Okay, so now let me walk you through. The woman whom we started off talking about first, she had menstrual pain. Let me walk you through what's happening. At the beginning of the month, a woman has very little estrogen in her bloodstream, but it rises to a peak. The amount of estrogen then peaks, and then it falls. She's ovulating. The ovary is releasing an egg. And then over the next week or so, the amount of estrogen starts rising again, and that's because the uterus is the most optimistic organ in the body. Every month, it is convinced, this is it. We're going to get pregnant for sure. So the amount of estrogen is rising in order to thicken the uterine lining in anticipation of pregnancy. But after about a week, the disappointed uterus discovers we are not pregnant after all. And so the amount of estrogen falls, and that whole uterine lining gets detached, and it's flushed out in menstrual flow. Okay, but all of this can be changed. The amount of estrogen can go up, it can go down, depending on what you eat. Let me show you how this works. This is the uterus in the middle. And you see going out to the side, the fallopian tubes reach out and they attach to the ovaries where the eggs come from. Now, in the middle of the uterus, you see that pink lining? That's called the endometrium, the inside of the uterus. That's where, if a little fertilized egg comes down, it will attach there. So every month, that uterine lining thickens up in anticipation of pregnancy. And let's say you had too much estrogen. Too much of that female sex hormone that causes the thickening. What happens? If you got too much of estrogen in your bloodstream, that uterine lining thickens up too much. And as it does so, it releases what are called prostaglandins that are maladjusted chemicals causing pain. This is what was happening to that poor young woman who had terrible menstrual pain. Okay, so how do I use foods to get my hormones back in balance? How can I tackle estrogen? Well, I got 3 steps. Let me illustrate the first one by telling you about Catherine. Catherine grew up in Louisiana. She was an Air Force aerospace engineer, and she went into Iraq in 2003 with the US military to set up the military bases that they had over there. And let me tell you something, when you're working in a war zone and you're eating what the government gives you, you don't gain very much weight. But eventually her tour of duty came to an end, and the Army sent her back, or the Air Force sent her back home. And when she got off the plane, her friend said, "Catherine, what did you miss when you were in Iraq?" And you know what she missed? She missed cheese. Macaroni and cheese snacks, cheese on everything, queso. And so a friend of hers, actually for her birthday, gave her 48 boxes of macaroni and cheese dinners, which Catherine ate for 48 days straight. That's right. Well, what happened? She gained weight, but she also started getting some pain in her abdomen. And the pain didn't go away, and it got a lot worse with her monthly cycle. And eventually her doctor did a laparoscopy. That's where you make an incision below the belly button and you look inside. And the doctor said, "We got our diagnosis. You have endometriosis." That means the endometrial cells, those cells that are supposed to line the uterus, appear to be escaping out through the fallopian tubes, and they implant all around the abdomen. They can get stuck on your intestines, on the ovaries, on the fallopian tubes, all around. They can swell, they can bleed, they can cause scarring. They hurt. And for many women, it is excruciating. And it not only causes severe pain, but because it can attack the fallopian tubes and the ovaries, it will lead to infertility. She tried painkillers. She tried hormonal treatments. Nothing was making the pain go away. And finally, her doctor said, "Well, Catherine, there is one other treatment. We can take out your uterus. We could just do a complete hysterectomy. Your pain's going to be gone." Well, Catherine was 27 years old. And she and her husband were sort of newlyweds, if I could say that. And she wasn't entirely keen on the idea of having her uterus removed, but nothing was helping, and she really couldn't function. She was in so much pain. She finally agreed to the procedure. They scheduled it for 6 weeks later. In the interim, a friend convinced her to go see a dietitian, a nutrition expert, to look at her diet. And the nutrition expert gave her effectively the diet that I had suggested for the young woman at the beginning who had menstrual pain. No animal products, keep oils to a minimum. That's what she did. And she felt better. She felt a lot better. She was losing weight, her energy came back, and her pain started to diminish. It was not entirely gone, but it was better. But 6 weeks later, she dutifully showed up for the procedure. They anesthetized her. The doctor opened her up using a laparoscope, opening up, looking inside, getting ready to remove the uterus through the laparoscopic incision. But an hour later, she woke up. She was in the recovery room, and the doctor was there. And the doctor said, "Catherine, I need to tell you something. I didn't do it. I opened you up, but I didn't remove your uterus. I didn't do the hysterectomy at all. Your endometriosis somehow has effectively disappeared." Now, she had a lot of scarring where it had been, and she had some adhesions where the endometriosis process causes one part of the body to stick to another. This is scarring. And the doctor said, "Well, I just freed that up, so you should be fine." But the endometriosis itself has somehow disappeared. Her mother was in the room with her, and her mother said, "Well, she went vegan." And the doctor said, "Stop it. Foods do not cause endometriosis, and there's no way that a diet change is going to make it go away. There's only one explanation for this. This has got to be a miracle." So I think miracle must be written in her medical records somewhere. Anyway, she lost a lot of weight. She lost a lot of weight, but she never lost her uterus. And Catherine now has 3 kids of her own. And in fact, she started becoming one of our Food for Life instructors here at the Physicians Committee, where she teaches other women how to take back their health. So just like a diagnosis of dysmenorrhea, menstrual pain, infertility, endometriosis, these are conditions that are to a large degree driven by what I'm going to call hormone haywire, where your hormones are out of balance. Okay, so Catherine liked macaroni and cheese snacks and queso. Does cheese have hormones in it? Of course it does. Cheese comes from milk. Milk comes from a cow. Cows are impregnated. Did you know this? On every farm in the world where you're raising dairy cattle, they are artificially inseminated in a rather unpleasant way. And as you probably know, their calves are taken away. The male calves are killed, revealed. The female calves are taken away and raised in isolation away from their mother, despite how traumatic that is for everybody. But that's the way we take the milk instead of letting the calf have it. Cheerful, right? Point is this. The cows are impregnated every year. Cow's gestation is about 9 months. They're milked during much of that time. Pregnant cows make estrogen that gets into the milk, and when you measure it, there's some in their blood plasma, but there's a lot more of it in milk. It's only a trace, but it's more than enough to affect our biology. So there is no such thing as hormone-free milk. Okay, could this affect your biology? Yeah, it could, both for women and for men. Researchers studied men in a fertility clinic. Some of them ate relatively little cheese, half a serving a day. Some ate more than a serving a day. And what they found was that those who ate the most cheese had the worst sperm counts. You can measure sperm count, just the absolute number. You can measure morphology, meaning their shape, or motility, meaning can the sperm swim straight. And all of these are affected by cheese. Why? What we believe is happening is that there are traces of female hormones in the cheese that affect a man's fertility. Now, wait a minute. How much could there be? Well, not much. It's really only a trace in any particular serving of cheese, but your average American consumes 37 pounds of cheese every single year, plus milk, plus yogurt, plus ice cream, plus butter, plus all the dairy that's baked into the cookies and cakes and pies. You're getting a substantial amount of estrogen. This can affect men. This can affect women. Oh, men, before we go away from you, I wanted to mention something else. Guy goes into the clinic. He says to his doctor, "Doc, I'm having trouble with my nature." And the doctor says, "I'm not quite sure I follow." And the patient says, "How do I put this? Can't raise the flag." And the doctor says, "I understand. You've got erectile dysfunction. You want a Viagra prescription." And the patient says, "Yeah, doc, can you do that for me?" So the doctor writes out the prescription. The patient takes it and runs out the door, at which point the doctor drops his pen, races out the door after the patient, and says, "We are not done. Come back. We're not finished." The patient then sits back down in the doctor's office, and the doctor looks the patient in the eye and says, "I need you to understand what you're really dealing with. Erectile dysfunction is not caused by performance anxiety in a middle-aged man. It's caused by vascular disease, narrowed arteries." Here's what I mean. The male sexual anatomy is a sort of a hydraulic system. It was obviously devised on a Monday because things are going wrong with it all day long. What I mean is you need good blood supply for it to work. And if a man has robust blood flow to his private parts, everything works normally. But if the arteries are narrow and only a trickle of blood gets through, things don't work. Nothing happens. And so this is a condition called atherosclerosis. As a result of eating meat, dairy products, eggs, and animal products, you have a diet that's high in saturated fat that causes the body to make more cholesterol particles that irritate the artery wall and cause little bumps to form. They're almost like blisters or scars that narrow the artery passageway for blood. And all of these animal-based foods also have cholesterol itself, so that you got too much cholesterol in your bloodstream. Here's what the doctor explains. The key thing is this. You've got narrowed arteries to your private parts. but this is a whole body disease. You've also got narrowed arteries in all likelihood to your heart. Your coronary arteries are probably affected. And even the carotid arteries and their branches going to your brain are affected by this disease process too, meaning you're at higher than average risk for a heart attack or stroke within the next 3 to 5 years. So take your Viagra if you want to, but that's not going to reverse any of this. Before you leave our office, I want you to make an appointment with a registered dietitian to teach you about a plant-based diet that has no cholesterol in it, no animal fat, and you've got a shot at reversing those artery lesions. And I want to tell you something. In our research studies here at the Physicians Committee, where men start plant-based diets, what we discover is that although they're doing it for weight loss or to get their blood sugar down or to get their blood pressure or weight down, one of the most common side effects, if I can put it that way, is their erectile dysfunction goes away. Okay, there you have it. All right, so what else affects our hormones? Your liver. You know, the liver, we abuse our poor livers all too much. Your liver is your friend. Your liver is trying to get rid of excess hormones. You see the liver in the top of the screen there? That big red organ. It's filtering out estrogens from your blood. It sends them down that little green passageway called the bile duct. And the excess estrogens are filtered out by the liver, sent down the bile duct. They go into the intestinal tract. They're carried away with the waste. You're literally flushing away unwanted estrogens. Pretty good, right? Well, except that this whole system requires fiber. Fiber is plant roughage, beans, vegetables, fruits, whole grains. They've got fiber in them. The fiber holds on to those excess estrogens and carries them out with the waste. Well, what if your lunch was chicken breast? It's not a plant. Doesn't actually have any fiber, now does it? Or if you ate an omelet or a hunk of cheese, those aren't plants. They don't have fiber. And what happens if there's not enough fiber in your intestinal tract? What happens is the liver still pulls the estrogen out of your blood. It still sends it down into the intestinal tract, but it ends up being reabsorbed back into the blood because there wasn't any fiber to hold it in place. And it goes circling around and around and around from the liver to the intestine to the bloodstream over and over again. How do I interrupt that? As soon as you start a plant-based diet, there's lots of fiber to carry it away. Okay, I want to make sure you're paying attention. Spam. Fiber or no fiber? Aha. Spam does not come from the spam tree, does it? So here is my spam receptacle, and out it goes. Okay, KFC. Fiber? No fiber. Well, there would be a little fiber if you ate the carton. But the chicken itself, sorry, that can go in the same place. Now, there are some foods that started out as plants, but they got gooped up, the fiber was removed, and they can go there too. Okay, so now let's shift gears. I want to talk about something else, and that's because menstrual pain, infertility, endometriosis, these things won't kill you. But some things can kill you, and that includes breast cancer. This is a breast cell. See the estrogen molecules on the outside? They can sneak through the cell membrane, and then once they're inside, they can go through the nuclear membrane where they can attach to your DNA, and they can convert that cell into a cancer cell that can then divide into 2, then 4, then 8, then 16. It spreads throughout your body. Estrogens can cause cancer. We've known this for a long time. When you look at the amount of estrogen in a woman's blood, you can predict her cancer risk to a degree. More estrogen, more cancer. So how do I bring it down? Okay, avoid the cheese. That way I'm not eating any estrogen. High fiber foods. And a third thing is to reduce fats in general. For reasons we don't really understand, reducing fats of all kinds helps us to bring estrogens down to where they ought to be. Okay, shift gears. Let's talk about your thyroid gland. Your thyroid is at the base of your neck, and it has an important job. It oversees your body's use of energy. And if you don't have much thyroid hormone, you're hypothyroid. You got no energy. You feel weak, you're sensitive to cold, you're constipated, you're gaining weight, you're depressed, your skin and hair don't seem healthy. But the opposite can happen. Instead of too little thyroid hormone, your thyroid gland makes too much. And now you're hyperthyroid. And that's just the opposite. You're typically losing weight, your pulse is rapid, you're nervous, you're on edge, you're just revved up. Well, what's this about? Well, the first thing is that this is thyroid hormone, thyroxine. See those big purple molecules, purple elements? That's iodine in the thyroxine molecule. You need iodine in order to allow your body to make thyroid hormone. You don't have iodine, it doesn't happen. Well, in the United States, low iodine really became much less of an issue. In 1924, that was the year that the Morton Company started marketing iodized salt. But of course, we're modern people now. We use sea salt or kosher salt or Himalayan salt. And they may not be iodized unless it's actually mentioned on the label. Now, the dairy industry will race in and say, well, wait a minute, there's iodine in dairy products. Okay, true, but cows don't actually make iodine. Cows don't make any element. The reason that there is iodine in dairy products is that the cow's teats, the cow's udder, gets caked with milk and feces and mud and goo. And so the dairy farmers will use an iodine-containing disinfectant painted onto the udder, and some of that disinfectant gets into the milk. That's right. And they also sometimes feed them iodine supplements. But this is not natural in any way. My favorite one, actually, best source of iodine really, is sea vegetables, seaweed. Now, when I was a kid growing up in North Dakota, I never heard of nori. But if you go to a sushi bar, the sushi rolls are wrapped in nori seaweed. Don't get the fish sushi unless you're very well insured. But get the cucumber roll or the asparagus roll or something like that. And the nori that it's wrapped in, lots of iodine. Same with the wakame, seaweed in your miso soup, or arame, which is a very delicate seaweed that's often used in salads. You mix it up with some cucumber, sliced cucumbers, a little seasoned rice vinegar, a touch of salt, delicious, wonderful. But now the biggest reason, I have to say, for thyroid abnormalities in the United States is thyroid antibodies. In other words, you're getting enough iodine, but antibodies are somehow attacking your thyroid gland. Well, what's that about? This will not be on the test, but these are the names of the different antibodies. And what they're doing is, in some cases, they cause the thyroid gland to not make enough thyroid hormone. In other cases, they attack the thyroid regulating machinery so it can't turn off, and you're making too much in the way of thyroid hormone. Well, what's causing these antibodies to form? What we think is happening is that you're consuming certain foods that your body recognizes as foreign. And in response, your body makes antibodies to try to knock out that foreign protein. But those antibodies end up attacking you too. Now, we got some interesting data from the Adventist Health Study 2. Huge study, almost 66,000 people. And what they looked at was hypothyroidism. Vegans had the lowest prevalence of hypothyroidism. The people who had the most were lacto-ovo vegetarians, people who don't eat meat, but they make up for it with cheese and yogurt. They did the worst. Now, when it comes to hyperthyroidism, the vegans again did the best. The omnivores now did the worst. They were having dairy products and meat and eggs. And what we think is happening is that the animal products are triggering antibody production. So we need more research on this. No one has yet done a study of bringing in people with thyroid problems, putting them on a vegan diet to see if they do better. But many individuals are doing this on their own, finding that it does help. So stick with your doctor, take your medication, but do go on a plant-based diet and see how you do. Okay, one more hormone that I want to tell you about, and that's insulin. Insulin is needed to get sugar into your cells. And if you don't have working insulin, you've got diabetes. So our research team tested a conventional diet for type 2 diabetes compared to a plant-based diet for type 2 diabetes. And this is the slide that I showed you earlier. The conventional diet, that's the red line, they do okay. The people on the plant-based diet do dramatically better. Why? Let me walk you through this. This is Vance. Vance was a Washington, D.C. policeman, came into our research study with type 2 diabetes. He's had it for years, but he lost 60 pounds in the course of our research. On a vegan diet, the weight went away on its own. He stopped his diabetes medications. His hemoglobin A1C dropped from 9.5, which is out of control, to 5.3, which is totally normal. And by the way, his erectile dysfunction went away too. Okay, why? This is a cell. The reason I'm showing you a cell is that inside that cell, glucose powers all of its actions. And the glucose, those are the little dots up on the upper left. Those little dots, those little glucose molecules need to go through those funny little purple channels to get inside the cell to provide power for it. Well, they can't get in the cell. They can't get in a muscle cell or a liver cell unless they have insulin, which acts like a key, just like a key in a lock. Those insulin keys attached to those red receptors that triggers those channels to open up, and now the glucose comes in. Here it comes. Okay, so if you have type 2 diabetes, you've got all of this machinery, but you've got something else. You've got those yellow blobs. Those are fat collections, fat particles. Now, doctors hate words like fat. They'll call it intramyocellular lipid. But what it is fat. In a muscle cell, and the same thing happens in liver cells, fat accumulating in muscle cells and liver cells stops insulin from working. Let me repeat that. Fat building up inside your cells stops insulin from working. So it's not drinking the soda that caused diabetes or eating some bread. Those foods simply contributed glucose, which normally would be able to enter the cell and power it. That's good. But if you got fat, beef fat, chicken fat, fish fat, fryer grease building up inside your cells, the glucose can't get in. So that is why Vance got better, because he was on a low-fat vegan diet. It's got no animal fat and very little of any kind of fat. That's right. Type 2 diabetes can turn right around. The body can heal. This is an important concept. You may have all kinds of problems, but your body can heal to a great degree. And I got so excited about what we can do with hormonal issues, whether it's menstrual pain, infertility, endometriosis, or more severe, cancer risk, regulating our energy and our thyroid hormone, reversing diabetes. There's so much to it that I got all excited, so I wrote this book called Your Body in Balance. And the first part deals with sex hormones and all the mischief that they can cause. The second part deals with what I'm going to call metabolic conditions, diabetes, thyroid conditions, but even how you feel and how you look, talking about your skin, your hair, your mood. And then the third part says, okay, how do I feel better? A healthy diet, how to avoid environmental chemicals. And then we have menus and we have recipes. And let me brag about that for just 1 minute. Lindsay Nixon did the menus for this book. And I got to tell you, she did a beautiful job, 65 recipes. But when she sent them with a note that said, Dr. Barnard, this way of eating cured my menstrual pain too. So let's call that validation. Okay, so the old idea, I eat bad food, I get sick. True. Let's be a little bit more sophisticated. If you eat the right kinds of foods, you can control your hormones, and that will affect all kinds of things that we thought we had no choice and no choice in or no control over. That's what we want to do. Let's get sophisticated. So let me ask everybody's help. A lot of people need this message, but they're not watching it. You and I have to change the world together. That means take this information, let's learn it, let's connect, let's spread this link, this program with everybody that you know, and let's share it. Let's make some noise. And when I say make noise, I mean make noise. You're on social media, whether it's Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram, or anything else, let's get the message out so that kids don't have to grow up to have menstrual pain that stops them from being able to play sports or go to class, so that a couple in their 30s doesn't have to have this diagnosis of infertility, so that a woman of 45 doesn't have to have a diagnosis of breast cancer, or a man of 55 doesn't have to be dealing with diabetes. Now, none of this is perfect. You can be on a healthy diet and still get sick. That's for sure. But this is powerful. Let's put it to work. Thanks very much.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.